Welcome back to the Federal Executive Forum on Federal News Network. We're talking about zero trust architecture, and we were just pointing out specific programs. Mark, I want to throw it over to you at Illumio. You all, have doing a lot of work in the private sector as well, right? And a lot of the capability and implementations cross over into what you're seeing in the federal service, I would imagine. Give us an example of a program you'd like to highlight.
Yeah, that's a good lead-in, Luke. We have a tremendous amount of experience in the commercial side, especially in the financial sector, where most of the large banks in the world are using Illumio to protect their financial transactions, right?
Because which is a heavily regulated sector, I might add.
Exactly. And so what we're finding is we're working right now with the Department of the Air Force, specifically on something called CNAP, which is Cloud Native Access Point. And that was released back in August of this year. And one of the things in there, of course, is microsegmentation, which they authorize as ingress. But specifically, we're working with them on developing an on-prem zero trust security stack that you could basically come into an Air Force base and install. The analogy I like to describe, it's like a tennis court where that's the legacy system, and then you come in with a tennis bubble, and you now have 24/7, 365 ability to play tennis, just like a security stack on a legacy Air Force data center would give you that 24/7, 365 zero trust ability as well. They're looking at it like infrastructure as code, really applying a lot of the principles of Cloud One to that environment. So we're working with the Department of the Air Force to basically focus on the microsegmentation piece. And since we're decoupled from the network architecture and we're focusing on application security, we can install very quickly, and we can actually protect those initially high value assets. But we're looking at 180 Air Force bases and Space Force bases. So you've got to have automation, like Trafinia said, which is extremely important. And even Chris talked about containerized applications. And so from a delivery perspective, you would have to have that as well. So we have a containerized version of our software that can be rolled out very quickly, automated to help the Department of the Air Force really get to at least a modicum of zero trust. And we're also working with them on the visibility piece as well, right? They call it network discovery. So you've got to discover, view the network, and then you can start to microsegment and roll this out.
We've had Frank from the prior CTO of the Air Force on here several times, a very complex environment. And I think that virtual moat around those high valued assets, super important. We're gonna roll over to top priorities. Alper, let me start with you. I know there's a lot of different things you're working on. Top priority for you right now with zero trust architecture.
Well, my top priority is to see the project that we launched to its 100% success. I might sound like a broken record here, but a lot of eyes are on us. So 100% of my attention is really focused on this project at this time. And it's important that we put out some example ZTAs out there. But what we do with our projects is we also complement each solution that we build with an 1800 series document, which we work on in parallel as we develop our solutions. And this 1800 series document is what we refer to as practice guide. We basically describe how we put together the solution, and we outline the steps that somebody else can take over and recreate the solution. We list the technologies that we used, test cases that we performed, demonstrated, and we also map the solution's capabilities, security capabilities to NIST cybersecurity framework. And so we have really two parallel activities that are top priority that is on my plate, going in parallel. And we want to put out anything that we developed, and we can also put out as or document at the same time. And that is our focus right now.
And we don't consider that broken record. We consider that being laser focused. Shane,
Yes,
top
we're
priority.
laser focused. Thank you.
Absolutely laser focused. Shane, top priority for this year. Number one priority.
Um, I know this is going to say, I know we've talked about a lot of really great architectural things, technology things, but honestly, I think one of the biggest things we're focused on right now is the cultural change.
That's okay. That's a big one.
And it's the hardest, actually, in my view. Mark Schwartz, I think, demonstrated this better than any former CIO of USCIS. He spent 3 years driving cultural change so that we could do agile development. Zero trust, while it adds a lot of capabilities, a lot of great useful things from the security side, even on the networking side, it does add friction as well, to your user population, to your development teams, to your networking teams. So driving cultural change and getting back to some of the points we've made about, hey, taking away those privileges or taking away things that people have always done or the way they've always done things, is just, you can't speak enough volumes about that. And you start now. You don't wait until you're trying to implement those technologies and they all are, having meltdown. You need them on board. You need them, you need to be part of that team. So we've, focusing on that cultural change is going to be a big piece of what we do this year while we implement a number of newer technologies, API security, and finishing out our security, our cert automation. Those are going to be other things going on in the background so that when we get ready the culture is ready for those changes.
Cultural change means there's a lot of cheese moving, right? So big area to focus your attention on. I really do appreciate that. Trafinia, number one priority for you in regards to zero trust this year.
Yeah, unfortunately, it's going to touch on what Shane was talking about earlier about those Microsoft Word documents and making sure that we have all the inputs from all of the different program offices, the network engineers, the IAM people. We need to have everyone on board, making sure we all know what zero trust means to the SBA. So we're continuing to work on those documents as well as EDR. We are already utilizing EDR at the SBA, but we want to make sure that all of those agents or that infrastructure is everywhere that it needs to be. So we'll be continuing to work on that as well.
Great place to focus the attention. All right, we're going to wrap it up with this last question. Tony, I'm going to start with you at Lookout. What I'm going to ask you is, what does it look like in 2 to 3 years? What does the environment look like when you're entering into said agency? What are you expecting to see? What's sort of coming out of the petri dish, out of the lab into the operator's hands 2 to 3 years from now?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think I'll give Shane a little credit on this one. I read an article recently where he was quoted as saying that the ultimate goal of zero trust is to put your entire enterprise out on the public internet. And that's a daunting proposition for private sector and public sector alike to think about what that truly means. And I think, we've touched on it many times today. Zero trust it's a cultural shift. There will probably never be a proclamation of mission accomplished, right? We're always striving to close the gaps, but the threat actors, as we know, will always continue to adjust their attack surface and the threat vector, and we always have to keep up with that. So 2 to 3 years out, I suspect virtually all of the networks will be out on the public internet. And might be still some legacy systems in some corners of public and private sector. But the good news is even today, there's technology to support those initiatives. And I only expect those to continue to improve. Ransomware is not going away. State-sponsored attacks are not going away. We will continue to see different things, right? We've seen pipelines shut down. We've seen meat distribution impacted. I suspect that we'll potentially see some things on a grander scale that potentially are more life and society impacting than those two, and we have to be ready for it. So again, the technology's there, and the technology and the vision of zero trust are fortunately both marching in the same direction.
No doubt the attacks aren't going to go away, and no doubt they're going to get much more sophisticated. Thank you very much, Tony. Chris, how about over at Quest? What's it going to look like in 2 to 3 years from where you all sit?
From where we sit, and when I think about how far we've come. And I think that's the credit we don't really give ourselves, both as industry, as government, in commercial space. We've made a lot of leaps and bounds, quite frankly. I remember when security was not even a thought. I remember people thinking that, well, it's not connected to the network, it's secure, I don't have to worry about it, it's in a locked room. They'd give us the Mission Impossible example of Tom Cruise descending on a pulley system to go break into a computer and say, oh, that's a secure system. It says, no, it's not. What we see really is a modernization of what I think of the identity pipeline. And when I say the identity pipeline, I think of the basic questions of what we ask people in an access query. That is, who you are, what you have, where you are, what you know, and I like to add how you're connecting as well. And what we're going to find is that that identity pipeline is going to need varying points of management, more sophisticated automation, quite frankly, because all those factors really need machine speed to process, for instance. And I think we need to move away from the concept of that. If I'm just collecting data, collecting logs, I'm looking at screens, God forbid, for instance, or I'm looking at the normal anomaly detection or threat detection we're doing right now, we're gonna have continuing issues. For instance, we talked about pipeline closures, supply chain attacks, things like that. We didn't even talk about Kaseya, quite frankly, which is a huge identity pipeline issue that we actually had. So when we think about the future, it's going to be, and I come back to what Shane said, for instance, that is, it's going to be automation, it's going to be systems. And I don't necessarily mean artificial intelligence and machine learning. Sure, those will play a role, but I think it's going to be much better systems that can actually aggregate, for instance, detect things in those things, highlight them to the right people, for instance, and route those requests. The old workflows that we used to have, for instance, I used to laugh at things like the good old Lotus Notes days where we'd have workflows and we said, oh yeah, I now have a Word document to go edit. We've got to do the same thing in security, for instance. So when we're working on identity as a system or identity pipelines, we've got to figure out exactly how do we route everything to the right person at the right time, for instance, to get people the right level of access, because that's where the rubber meets the road. For instance, it's not just deploying a great new system or buying a nice slick solution. It's how do we actually implement these things? So I think the future is going to hold a lot more automation. It's going to disseminate a lot more decision trees among people that normally aren't part of the security pipeline or identity pipeline today. And it's going to put a lot of onus on end users. They're going to have to get used to doing more sophisticated things with their devices and paying attention to the types of security they're accessing and technologies they're using on a personal level, because there is no more perimeter, quite frankly, and we all know that now. I've become keenly aware, quite frankly, and now the future means that the identity pipeline means that everyone's going to be involved, which means more automation, for instance, and our systems are going to have to get a lot smarter for us to be successful in the future.
And continue to stay smart. Mark, how about over at Illumio? What's the demand signal looking like? What are you anticipating in 2 to 3 years?
Right. So let me just preface that by saying that what I'm seeing, certainly the automation piece is extremely important, but I think we as a country, we as folks in federal and the vendor community that supports the federal space need to have a much higher degree of urgency. I believe that there needs to be a way to prioritize the fact that we are going to get attacked. We have to worry about China, because that's our #1 adversary. And we have to make sure that we can protect against these nation state type attacks. But I think from our perspective, what we see is that you've got to have that visibility. We just released something just a couple of weeks ago called Illumio Cloud Secure, which allows cloud native application visibility so that you can actually see what's happening in the cloud from a workload and application perspective. That's absolutely critical when you're talking about putting your unclassified network in the public cloud, for example. And give you an example of why visibility is so important. So one of our customers at the US Space Force had put Illumio in to their network, and within 10 minutes, they were able to see unauthorized connections on the back end that they didn't even know about. This was extremely eye-opening. They were able to shut that down immediately, and that made them a big believer of the importance of visibility and then micro-segmenting. So I really believe that the visibility piece is extremely important, and then we're going to start to roll out micro-segmentation. The last comment I'll make is I would agree with Shane about the term zero trust going away. So maybe by 3 years from now, we won't have the term zero trust. It'll just we'll be talking probably about the components, whether it's identity, whether it's microsegmentation under the app and workload pillar, et cetera. So perhaps we'll all have a T-shirt where it just says Zero Trust with a line through it, and then maybe have some kind of clever comment on the back that talks about what we're really doing now.
Sure, I survived Zero Trust. Traphinia, what's it going to look like in a couple of years? If I'm a small business owner trying to apply for a loan, am I going to be able to sit on the couch with my mobile device and feel good securely about that and be successful?
Yes, the answer is yes. We're working to make that more possible in the future.
Fantastic.
Yeah, I think it'll be really good. But we're going to be leveraging SOAR, that security orchestration and automated response, for all of our infrastructure. We're making sure that we will continue to leverage that and leverage all of the time saved, so that our security engineers can focus on those high level threats. And then also, I really think in the next 1 to 3 years, we'll continue to see more of a collaboration between the government agencies and industry. I've seen a lot of that in the past just 9 months, 9 to 12 months. There's been a lot of collaboration to find a zero trust solution that encompasses all of the pillars. And because not just one vendor has the solution and not just one agency has the solution, but I really see a collaboration and competitors working together to make that solution. So I'm excited for the future, and I think we'll come out with something more secure for everyone.
Right. I think that's where there's maturity models, et cetera, really come into play.
Yeah.
Jane, what can we expect in a couple of years? I know you all aggressively into the cloud. You still have a bunch of legacy stuff out there you're working on. A lot of benefit seekers demanding your goods and services. What do you see in 2 to 3 years?
Hopefully, I'm still employed. That's always going to be a plus.
That's a going assumption.
Going assumption. I think I see a move towards three things. One, heavy focus on data-driven security. That behavioral-based approach to how you do security, as opposed to sort of just at-large monitoring. Non-normal. You're not looking for the way outside the box, not abnormal. You're really looking for the little tiny changes in that big bell curve, which is really focuses you back onto that threat hunting approach to security. I think we'll also see a move towards, following suit with what the development community is doing, a domain-driven design. I think we're going to see a domain-driven security as well. USCIS is already working towards that. That's going to replace the concept of zero trust. That's going to be what we do. That's how we'll start thinking about it, because it's just sort of what happens. And I think finally, you'll see, as part of what you can do with some of the zero trust principles and practices, a heavier push towards microservices and even serverless environments and deployments. It helps a little bit with multi-cloud if that's something you're really terribly interested in doing and really creating yourself all kinds of headaches for yourself. But obviously there's going to be the shortcomings with FSMA that need to be addressed before we get there. FSMA wouldn't even consider a microservices system technically a system. And then it creates a number of problems where data lives, how data lives, and where it exists. But I think that drive towards that is because it solves certain security problems, it creates others, but it does solve a number of development problems as well as security issues. So I think that's going to be very critical as well.
Yeah, no doubt that some of these policies will undoubtedly catch up. Alper, take us home here. You have a fantastic publication that you laid out there, got in front of that whole community. Now you're putting these references together. What are you expecting to see? What's NIST expecting to see in regards to zero trust architecture across the community over the next 2 to 3 years?
Hopefully, we anticipate that, our example ZTAs that we will be implementing will bring value and will be adopted, will be in use, or at least will be used as a starting point for most outfits that want to move towards ZTA. So that's as an outcome of our work. But in terms of where everyone is going to be, I think most will be in a more mature state in their zero trust orchestration, have better, more granular policies in place, because they will be more clued into their networks, what's happening in their networks, what's connected, who's on the network. There will be more focus on behavior-based security, I would say, which is really the key. And of course, my panelists already mentioned about the automation aspect of things. That definitely is important, needs to be even better. Early detection and responses is whichever way you do it, and automate it is very critical. Yeah, so I think through 1 to 3 years, I think there will be some innovations in that regard, but we'll also be in a more mature state, I would say. I'm not saying that everyone is going to be 100% zero trust, because there's not going to be any such thing. As we move forward, we'll probably discover more clever hacks that infiltrate into our networks also. And but at the same time, we'll figure out better ways to protect the network. But right now, zero trust is the way to go about it, because it allows us to secure our high value assets in a more granular fashion. And it allows us to also get better at it, because it's policy based, and because we're also analyzing our logs, and so it's a system that kind of gets better as you utilize it.
No doubt. I mean, it's an architecture, it's a journey, and we're all on board. I want to thank each one of you, not only for taking your time out of your busy schedules to talk about this subject, but for everything that you do to keep this country safe. One of you cited that, there's a lot of bad actors out there trying to do some really bad things. So we appreciate the community coming together to keep everyone in this country safe. I'd like to also thank the sponsors for supporting us on the show. I'd like to thank the good people here at Federal News Network that make our program so successful and enjoyable. And most of all, we'd like to thank you, the listening audience out there that tune in every month. You're listening to the Federal Executive Forum on Federal News Network.